This is Mogul Live. I'm James Pratt. Thank you very much for joining us. Today's episode is a very special episode. We've got an Emmy nominated producer, David Cormican, who's going to have a chat with us. Your opportunity as well to ask David any questions. Kaya, great to see you on the chat. Andrew, Stardust, great to see you guys in here. So we're going to get David on in just a moment, but anyone doesn't know David's work, TV producer, Northern Rescue, you can name Tokyo Trial, Shadowhunters. David is certainly very established, member of the Producers Guild of America. So Stardust, California, great to see you in the chat, Justin. Hey, Andrew, good to see you as well. So your opportunity as well, like I said, when we get Andrew in the chat, Irina, all the way from Australia, you're in the chat as well. Good to see you. But when we get David in the chat, have any questions you like, whether it be about Mogul as well. And for anyone wondering, where is David at the moment? So David works as the CEO and the partner for Don Comedy Television, as well as one of the key figures within Mogul. So really looking forward to having a chat with David when he jumps on. So we're just going to connect David just any minute now when we can pull David up. Let's see if we can get David. Great to see you as well, guys, for this Mogul Live as well. Hope you're all really well. And Adventures Ventures, good to see you back again. So we're just going to connect to David before. David, great to have you on Mogul Live.
Hey, how are you? Great, thanks for having me,
Really
James.
good. Yeah, anytime. So I've just given everyone just a little bit of a brief background about yourself. Obviously, Don Comedy Television as the CEO as well as a partner and also a key advisor with Mogul. Tell me a little bit about what you've been doing during the coronavirus.
Keeping busy, surprisingly. I thought, much like everyone else, perhaps that we would be quite, bored and twiddling our thumbs, but much to some of the, some of the people in my life's chagrin, I feel like I've been working a little bit more than not. And that's not to say that we're in production at the moment. We're obviously not, but we are heavy on development on several productions, including some that I'm writing and co-creating on. So, yeah, it seems like there's no shortage of stuff that needs to get worked on every day.
Have you found with the pre-production you're doing at the moment, is there any country at the moment that seems to be ready to shoot further than perhaps Hollywood or even Vancouver? Is there any country that's post-coronavirus has really come out strong?
I think, a lot of people are looking right now to some of those countries that have been operating the entire time. Um, like New Zealand actually, I think is starting to gear up again for with James Cameron and Avatar. Obviously, a little easier to contain it, given how the population density in New Zealand is so much less than most other populous areas of the world. Germany also has several shows that actually have shot almost entirely through the entire pandemic. Obviously, with new measures in place. Korea has also been a bit of an early back to the starting line, as well as Iceland. So there's a lot of eyes on those countries, and talking to some of my colleagues in those nations as well to sort of see how what plans they're putting into place. Obviously, as our governments start to and our film agencies and commissions start to release their suggestions and guidelines for the restart, we're sort of hotly looking at all of the other countries and what they've been doing as well.
Yeah. Hi, Kevin. Good to see you in the chat. A great question
Hey
just came
guys.
through before us. We're talking about a thing, and it's from Brooks Sand Stuff SFR. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that. Brooks Sand Stuff SFR. It says, "Hi, David. Have you got any news about House of Night?"
Yes. Actually, I shouldn't say yes. I should say sort of ish. We're heavy into development at the moment on the property. We've been working with a writer to put a script together, and we're in discussions with some fairly prominent worldwide partners at the moment, potential partners, I should say, as well as a couple of domestic broadcasters, both in the US and in Canada. So there are some very interesting conversations that are afoot. I can't necessarily share anything beyond that at this moment, but do stay tuned. PC and Kristen are launching the new installment of a book, of the final book in the um, in the latest version or the latest offshoot to House of Night on July 20th. So, and we may be having an announcement for that as part of that launch event. But yeah, you'll have to stay tuned and check in on PCs and Kristen's social media feeds as we sort
So
of get closer to that July 20th date. Yeah.
so anybody listening here today, House of Night, look out for that title. News to do with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
What?
great property. I'm really excited about it, and I'm glad the fans are super excited about it as well.
Sure. Well, one of the things, because I can see like already everyone's kind of responding really well to you just even introducing yourself. Uh, so I wanted to kind of maybe circle back a little bit for anyone that doesn't know a little bit too much about you, about how you started in the industry and then now being, the head of Don Comedy Television and also a key figure with Mogul. I mean, that kind of journey that you took.
Yeah, I mean, oddly enough, I kind of started similar to a lot of people in the industry, as I started in front of the camera as an actor, and that sort of led to a lot of uh, situations where I would say I was always the bridesmaid, never the bride, and going out for some fairly big roles and always getting callbacks and this and that, but I was always sort of the low man on the in terms of the experience on my resume. So I started getting really frustrated by that, but that frustration led to the idea of why don't I just write the parts that I'd like to play, and then you end there with a script in your hand. You're like, oh well, now I got to find someone to produce these, right? And so that sort
That's
of led
fantastic.
to the natural progression of me going from actor into writer or pretend writer into wannabe producer. And so I just started at that point. I was at a bit of a crossroads in my life where I was working a lot in the marketing industry, and specifically for automotive companies and stuff like that. And I wasn't necessarily all that enamored with vehicles, other than does it look good, and is it safe, and does it get you from A to B? And the rest of it was just a script for me. And I had an opportunity to start up a fairly large, prominent staffing agency for one of the big automotive agent companies. And I sort of made the decision, instead of doing that, to go down the path of focusing on as a producer and really sort of diving into that. So I started traveling around the world to Cannes, to MIPCOM, to TIFF, to down to AFM in LA, and basically any festival or conference that I could get to, that I could afford to get to, I went and just networked and started introducing myself as a producer, and very quickly sort of landed into an opportunity with a company out in Saskatchewan called Mind's Eye Entertainment, where I basically made a joke and it got me a job as their head of development. And
Do you remember what the
uh,
joke? Do you remember what the joke was?
well, yeah, it's a bit of a long-winded punchline, but basically, he was hiring someone else as his head of development at the time, and there's a couple of projects that I had created and some that I was representing, and he wanted to work with me on them, but he wanted me to wait a couple of weeks until he hired this new individual. And then, so a couple of weeks rolls around, I call him up, said, "Hey, we're ready to introduce me to this guy," and he says, "Actually, it's not going to happen. The guy's flaked out on me. Turns out doesn't want to move to Saskatchewan." And so he's like, and at that time, Kevin DeWalt was the principal there. He was in production on like 5 or 6 films, and he's like, "I'm up to my elbows. I can't even, come up for air right now. So call me back in 6 months, and we'll get it sorted then." And so then I was like, I don't know if this is a joke, perhaps, but it's more of just being brash, I suppose, and overconfident. But I just said, "Okay, fine. I'll call you in 6 months, or you can hire me tomorrow, and I'll get the job done for you." And he said, "All right, sure." I said, "No, no, no, I'm just kidding. You're supposed to tell me to, go fly a kite." He's like, "No, no, no. Like, send me your resume." I said, "I have an acting resume. I got nothing on there." He's like, just make it look as professional as possible. So I, put the couple short films that I'd done and some commercials and music videos. Um, and then, he flew me out a couple of weeks later. And then basically at the end of it was like a day-long interview where he sort of showed me around town, introduced me to the film commissioner and all that sort of stuff. And then at the end of that, he says, "I want you to say yes, but not today. I want you to go home, talk it through with your family, talk it through with your friends. And I want you to come back." And he's like, "Take a week, take a month, take 2 months. I don't care. I'll put you up on payroll. I'll put you up on get you a hotel, per diem, rental car. And as soon as you can commit to Saskatchewan, I'll commit to you." And so me being from Alberta, it wasn't that far of a stretch to go, I'm still going back to the prairies, I guess. But from Toronto, all of my friends were just like, you're crazy. What are you doing going in the middle of nowhere? You're already in the, either Toronto or Vancouver, the capital of film in Canada. So why would you ever dream of going to Regina of all places, right? So, but I did that. That was in 2008. Yeah, just near the tail end of 2008. It was December by the time I landed there, and there was more than 40 minus 40 degrees Celsius days that
Wow.
winter. And just to put it in perspective, minus 40 and minus 40 Fahrenheit and Celsius is where they meet. So it's
Right,
cold.
right, right.
Yeah, so that was 2008, and I basically went. That's sort of where I first realized that no one really knows anything in this industry. We're all learning every day and making it up. There is no A to B. There's only creativity and how you get the job done. And my very first meeting, I had a phone call with Arnie Olson, who wrote the movie All Dogs Go to Heaven and The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and director Bill Deere, who I grew up watching all of his movies, from Harry and the Hendersons to Angels in the Outfield and everything in between. And so here I was talking to two guys that I loved their movies growing up and I idolized them, and they had the careers that I wished for. And I had to give them script notes on this movie. At the time, it was called Awful Slimy Creature. Wonderful script, beautiful family film. Unfortunately, hasn't been made yet to this day, which is a shame, and it should. But I had to give them my notes on the script, and nervous, sweating bullets. Fortunately, this was before Zoom and Skype and all of that, so it was just a conference call. And I started giving my notes, and they had no idea it was this 25-year-old young buck on the other end. And they're going, "Oh, that's really smart. Oh, I wish I thought of that. Oh, that's a great idea. Oh, yeah, we could do that." I was like, "Oh my God, no one knows anything."
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Have you had much contact with? I mean, well, this is 2008. Obviously, you've kind of moved on further and further, but do you still keep in contact with that sort of group there that where you were working?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I still carry through into, you call it your Toronto life versus your prairie life, right? A couple of people like we work with all the time. Costume designer Brenda Schenner, brought her along on a bunch of stuff. Rob King and Tammy Beltrami. Rob's a director, Tammy's a script coordinator. We've brought them on several projects. Rob also writes, so we're working with him on a mini series we're developing right now with the CBC called Forgiveness, based on Mark Sakamoto's book of the same name. So yeah, you sort of we found a lot of good people. Lowell Dean, who also directed Wolf Cop 1 and 2. Yeah, there's a lot of great people from the prairie provinces. I feel like there's just a great work ethic, and unfortunately, the tax credits went down in 2012. The government at the time ended up canceling them, and a lot of us ended up moving. So it was the same time I moved back to Toronto in 2013.
And is that when you started with Don Comedy Television,
Yeah, Don and I, we actually
2007?
co-produced a film. I can't remember what year it was, but it was called 13 Erie. It was a horror film. And it was right near the end of my time in the prairies. And Lowell directed that, actually, um, along with another friend of ours, Roger Christian, who designed the lightsaber in Star Wars, among everything else. But yeah, so we co-produced that film together, and throughout that process, because I was actually splitting a lot of my time back and forth between Regina and Toronto, I was basically working on the post-production for the film, and got to meet Don, a little more intimately in that setting throughout the post process. But I was also on the board for the CMPA, which is the Canadian Media Production Association, which is the equivalent of the PGA, but just for Canada, obviously. And so I was on the board for that, representing the Saskatchewan seat. And Don and I got to spend quite a bit of time throughout that. And he was very generous, allowing me to sort of take him out for breakfasts and lunches here and there to pick his brain. And throughout those conversations, it eventually turned to me moving back to Toronto full time, and him and I wanting to do something else together. Initially, I sort of anticipated that we would be doing feature films, but when we went for that very first lunch to sort of talk about what a business between ourselves might look like. Don, this is after like weeks of preparing all of these films and the distributors that I know and this and that. And he sits down and we barely ordered our lunch and he says, "So I'm thinking about television." I'm like, me too.
Very left of field. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I had to like pull the entire meeting from left, yeah, right from left field. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, me too. Television. That's exactly what I was thinking. But it ended up being, a really prescient decision because obviously we've sort of seen this massive upheaval of the feature film industry in the last 10 years. And everyone's sort of running for the hills to television, and it's been a lot of feature film producers. So when we started out, this is the very beginning of 2013, Don and I embarked on this endeavor, and very quickly we sort of I don't want to say like we were pushing a boulder up a mountain, but it was really tricky in the sense that very few people actually in Canada, the broadcasters didn't really know who Don was per se, because Don is so heavy in terms of his feature film resume. And they had some experience with me because I had done a lot of development of television over the years, working out of Saskatchewan. But they didn't know Don, and it was kind of crazy to us. But we were still known as the feature film guys, and so that was a bit of our, sort of our cross to bear, I suppose. We had to sort of shake that, but that led to our very first television series, which was Between, which ended up being a co-production between ourselves and Mike McGowan and his company, Mulmer Feed. And then we also brought in the team over at Elevation Pictures, so Victor Lowy and Naveen Prasad and Laurie May, and we stuck to our strengths, which was feature film, and
Yeah.
so we brought the team back in. But the Nataline Rodriguez at Rogers and City TV, she was really a big fan of that because we were going to bring this big cinematic vision to her station. And then same thing with Netflix. We ended up bringing them to the table in what was essentially, what it was the very first Canadian Netflix original series deal. And so and they loved it as well because we were the filmmakers. We brought this cinematic feature film aesthetic to the TV series. And that was great. So that sort of kicked off our very first foray into television, which happened a lot faster than I would say most TV series take to gestate.
And a very successful foray as well. I mean, just quickly, you've got some Australian fans. Sean Robinson's
Oh,
still in the
nice.
chat. Joanna,
Hi,
Lottie
guys.
Marie, Kayaz just gave you some great feedback. So cool to hear the DC TV origin story. Adventus Ventures, I've seen that. Andrew, what's the Mogul? That's where Mogul comes in to make the script. Great feedback. Guys, just to give you a quick run in as well with David. Again, DC TV and obviously David's resume, Northern Rescue, Tokyo Trial, The Life of Marilyn Monroe. If you've got any questions about these titles as we're talking, just put them up on the screen and we can ask David exactly what you'd like to know. But just sort of leading into that, Dave, I mean, there's two titles that I'd really love to kind of get a little bit of a feedback from. But I mean, the
Sure.
first one's Northern Rescue. I mean, right around the world, everyone knows that show.
Oh,
Is there
awesome.
any sort of
Awesome.
experiences or any? I suppose I'm going to pull them. It's a work life as well, but I mean, anything that really stood out for you as a real standout point working on that show?
I mean, yeah, lots, so much. I mean, that was the very first show that I actually was a co-creator on, and I show ran, and it was the first sort of test of my writing abilities in terms of, actually taking the credit and having to put pen to paper. I've written a lot over the last, 10, 15 years, but never really sort of taken credit for it in a lot of the work that is being done. And so this was where, the hot seat was definitely there, and the fire was always burning and nipping at my heels, right? But it was such a great, rewarding experience to sort of have an idea that, sort of started up here and to start to see these characters come to life. And it really, I've got such a very soft spot for that show because it's just such a wonderful piece of television. And it's a bit of a departure from what we had, sort of normally been doing in terms of some of the content and the fare that we've been producing, which has often been very dark or violent. And that show really, the germination of that and the first seeds was I wanted to create a show that, everyone in my family could watch, from my daughter right up to, my grandparents, if they were still alive to this day, but also to have my aunts and my uncles and my nieces and nephews, for them to watch it as well, and for it to not be something that, my brother has to, close their eyes and
Right,
hug their ears,
right. Or
right?
leave the room for the ending. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing sort of gratuitous or forced about the show, um, other than maybe the
If,
emotion of it.
if someone was to kind of say to you, like, David, why was that show so successful? From a front-on view, why? I mean, how would you sum that up?
Um, I think it was, we've seen so much dark serialized television over the last 10 years. And don't get me wrong, great television. It's part of the reason why I want to be in this business and why I still am, is shows like, The Sopranos and Breaking Bad and the Ray Donovan, and, like the list goes on and on. Billions, Succession. These are such wonderful, gripping, dark shows. But I think it was at a time where the world wanted a little bit more hope, and levity. And I sort of wanted to create a show that would sit in the same spot of, there's this wonderful French film, um, which got remade, with Brendan Gleeson and Taylor Kitsch, called The Grand Seduction. And it's about a small town who's trying to lure this doctor to stay. And so everything's like going right when he's there, to try and get him to stay in that town. And so we wanted to create this show that like had that small, quaint, quintessential vibe to it, but also was raw and real and is family the way families exist, and not to sort of, sugarcoat around the issues, but to actually get in there and to, feel the nitty gritty, but to work our way through it so that it can provoke some of those conversations that families can maybe, watch it, but go, oh yeah, maybe we should talk about that.
It's got a sense of realness to it, a sense of authenticity to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we're very fortunate. Like the cast got along so well, so much so that we actually, they ended up requesting, everyone was put up in hotels and cottages and chalets and stuff like that. But eventually, the key cast requested that we put them up in a hotel, not a hotel, in a house altogether, because they were hanging out, spending so much time together, and they wanted to keep that going. So
That's
they
fantastic.
actually like really started to gel and bond and live as a family, which was quite crazy. So, of course, we indulged and did that, and you start to see some of that magic sort of transform and transpire across the screen as well.
Yeah. Kyla's just put in there, Northern Rescue was a stellar show, and Andrew's put in Taylor is
Oh,
awesome.
thanks, Kyla.
Uh, so, I mean, that's a great way to sort of segue into this question, because you've got obviously a lot of experience, but um, for someone who's been in the industry a long time like yourself, I mean, do you think TV is going to become easier or harder to make in the next 5 years?
Well, obviously, right now in the immediate and short term, it's going to be a lot harder, and that's just, post COVID. What does the industry look like? We're trying to figure that out right now. Obviously, PPE and safety and health measures are obvious choices, but then getting beyond that to, the suggestion of reduced work hours, to how do you insure or bond a show, when you can't, insurers are no longer protecting against COVID-19, and some of them as far as pandemics as well, or epidemics. So it was like, how do you guarantee completion on a show? So that those are some tricky answers. And fortunately, there's bigger and brighter brains than mine that are on, on this full time. It certainly keeps me up at night, though, in terms of like what that's going to look like. I feel very fortunate that we don't have anything immediately in production. We did have one film that was, hiatus, but fortunately, we were only 1 or 2 weeks into prep on that. So, I know yourself, like you've been hit with COVID and you were mid-production. So I really feel for you guys, because
So,
that's tough. Like, how are you going to, your cast, or their schedules going to align, your crew, all of that stuff. Can you get everyone back when it opens again? Um, yeah, so I'm feeling very fortunate and blessed that we are not in the middle of a massive insurance claim right now, or a battle legally with our insurers, that sort of thing. Um,
if,
so
if
I feel very
if
fortunate.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you for anyone that's here that's either about to start production or looking at pre-production on something. Hi, Gloria. Uh, would you say
Hey, my
there's any
mom.
sort of any sort of genre or any sort of style of TV show that you would say, and again, this is not holding you to it, but if you're going to be making a TV show post coronavirus, would you say, okay, well, we've had quite a bit of negativity. I think a comedy show would be good, or I think more a family show, or is there any sort of, I suppose, roadmap that you'd perhaps look to?
Yeah, we've been thinking a lot about that in terms of what types of shows are going to be, you know, COVID proof or coronavirus proof. And I don't know that there is an answer. I don't think there's any silver bullet because even a family drama is like, okay, well, how do you hug someone in a COVID world? How do you, how do mom and dad kiss? How does the daughter who's dating the bad boy, like how do we even hold hands on set? It's like these are some of the
Yeah,
questions that I think sort of takes that out. How do you, if it's a violent or an action project, how do people fight? Those are hugely intimate moments, right? With full on contact. So those are some tricky questions. I don't know. I mean, there's certainly there's no less demand for content right now. I mean, everyone's burned through their binging watch lists. So there's only going to be a demand for more and more. I think the reality is you're going to see budgets are going to go up. Hopefully, guilds and unions will work with us in terms of, crew coming down to make those environments more manageable in terms of the physical distancing that needs to happen.
yeah.
Um,
I
we'll
think
sort of,
I
yeah, I
think
think we're
that,
all going to sort of muddle our way through it.
and I think everybody has the same objective, whether you're, producer, writer, director, actor. I mean, it's about moving forward post coronavirus. No one gains anything by, being slow or sticking to the past. Another, I think, a good way to look at advice for yourself too is, I mean, if you're an actor right now and you're thinking about perhaps launching a career in Toronto or you want to go to LA, I mean, from your experience, is there any advice for an actor? Would it be beneficial to get credits in Vancouver and then go to LA? Or as a producer, you like seeing fresh faces? Or
Yeah, I think one of the advantages is going to happen in the very near future until immigration and borders start opening. There's going to be a massive push for local, local, local. So, which is great for Canadians in the sense that I think it's a chance for our star system to finally sort of grab hold. In the same way that Quebec has this incredible star system for all the francophone performers in this country. So I think that's a good news piece for Canadian performers. Internationally, I think it's the same thing. I think there's going to be a massive push towards domestic production wherever domestic happens to be. Um, so I think that's a great opportunity to like stay put where you are right now. don't don't try squeezing into LA if you're from England or wherever. I would stay within your own borders because I think there's going to be a massive opportunity because people are going to stick to those who are familiar to them and who are local and easily cast as opposed to having to jump through crazy immigration hoops, quarantine periods, all that sort of stuff, right? Because it is going to be a
exactly
reality.
right.
We're already sort of looking at
Yeah,
that for other people and building that in, having someone fly up, paying the increase in airfare if that's the case, 14 days of extra hotels and per diems. It's like that's all being factored in for certain things, but that's for I would say existing properties where your leads are already sort of baked in versus something that's brand new. There might be well, maybe we can save that money that we were going to spend on the massive star, put that into health and safety, still have a bit of a savings and have a bit of a lesser known name, but now casting purely for talent as opposed to talent plus name.
yeah, and I think that's a really good point because I think people have been forced to, as you said, look local based on a survival mentality. I mean, if you want to make a production, we've got some. Darren's joined the chat. Maria's joined the chat.
Hi guys.
Gloria, you're just at the top. David's mum. I wanted to ask you, obviously, with the industry obviously changing quite a bit with coronavirus, but it was changing before that. Obviously, streaming television. I mean, what sort of attracted you with the Mogul setup to kind of come in with that sort of progressive side to what Mogul's obviously wanting to offer.
Yeah, I mean, when I was approached by the team at Mogul, I was really enamored by the whole sort of commitment to transparency and to the evolution of what's a really truly archaic system. As progressive as we can be in some of the storytelling, we're pretty archaic and dinosaur-like in terms of the processes and procedures that take place on a set, and also in terms of the financing and how, there really isn't a I gotta watch my words, I suppose, but it just feels like there's always a bit of a raw deal for a lot of investors in Hollywood right now. And if you're an independent producer, there's not necessarily an easy path to financing. And that's what I really appreciated was the intent and the spirit behind the Mogul model, which really sort of allows, you know, it really allows a speed to market, and B, a level of transparency and efficiency that just doesn't exist in some of the larger machines that are so vertically integrated, where the left hand doesn't necessarily know what the right hand's doing most days, right?
Right.
And
And
so
these are
those were
large
some of
sums
the
of money
initial
as well.
attractions. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, and it's about sort of applying, some, the math of it all to it, and empowering your decisions through data, and also through audience feedback, because ultimately that's your end user. Right now there's these middlemen in the way by virtue of, sometimes it's other executive producers, other times it's the agencies and the managers, and then the distribution companies and the sales agents and the studios. And so you have all of these different, you know, people and places along the way that you have to go through in order to get to the fans, ultimately at the end of the day. And so anything you can do to sort of make that more direct, and more of a conversation and an engagement opportunity, as opposed to just sort of blasting, hey, watch this film, as opposed to, hey, what kind of film would you like to watch next? And allow us to try and
Yeah.
find that, and allow you to also, put your 2 cents in, both literally and figuratively, right? Because
And that's
everything that
and that's a different
people say or
experience for
do, yeah, it's,
the
it's a
fans
chance
as
to
well. I
invest, but
mean,
it's a chance to, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, go
No,
ahead,
very
James.
well
I
said. I
think I
mean,
cut you off there.
no, no, no. Well, I was going to say, Andrew distracted me just leading back to our question before. If you want to make a film, you just cast Eddie Murphy to play all the roles to
Yeah,
get it made.
absolutely. I'd watch
Um,
that.
yeah, but yeah, very well said, David. Because that's the thing, isn't it? You $100 goes into a film, and by the time it gets to the bottom, you don't know who's taking $10 here, $5 there, and it's a different sort of business model to perhaps other structures. Um, I do have a kind of an offhand sort of question. I did hear of a story that you worked with a penguin.
We did. Two penguins, actually.
Are you able to elaborate? Because I heard the end of that story, but I think our users might really enjoy. First of all, how do you work with a penguin, and what are the restrictions on a film set when you work with a penguin?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we take working with animals very seriously on set. We have what's referred to as an animal wrangler. And then also we usually are checking in with the local, sometimes the SPCA or the humane societies, but we're always sort of adhering to best practices in those regards. But when we were writing the script, it was a penguin right from the beginning. We flirted with other animals in the middle of that, but we ended up still landing on the penguin. And so when we started into the research phase for this, we hired an animal wrangler, Jordan Morel, and Jordan, she basically started to, investigate where penguins existed around the world. And then we also had some of our production team do it as well. Some of the people at DCTV also started looking, and we ended up finding a couple of different companies out there. Some were in Norway, others were in South Africa. Las Vegas was another one, and then West Edmonton Mall was sort of the fourth. And in the span of about 2 weeks, the price for penguins almost doubled and tripled because they thought that there was this run on penguins, but it was all our own people. So
Right. You
we
brought it on
initially,
yourself,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, right. Then when they realized it's all the same, oh, it's all the same company. Okay, the price came back down. But then we started to realize there's actually, this is before everything, Corona and COVID related, but we had a quarantine period that we would have to get into for the birds from Africa and also from Europe because there was an outbreak of avian bird flu. And so the quarantine period was super strict. I can't remember, it was several months, but it never would have worked for us. So then we had to start looking to the pair of penguins down in Las Vegas and also the ones out in West Edmonton Mall. Now, working with animals is similar to working with really young children. You tend to go for twins. So think of Full House with like the Olsen twins, right? So you
Right,
have
right,
Mary
right.
Kate and Ashley. So we actually end up having Dayu and Skadu. And so these two penguins end up coming from West Edmonton Mall. Again, it was more of an immigration thing. It was easier to get the birds from within Canada than it was to have them come up from Las Vegas. And
Right.
so these birds, they actually flew on WestJet. They flew in the cabin. They had their own seats. They flew with their handlers from West Ed. And when they arrived on set, we actually had to have we had to build a purpose-built I guess you call it a chilling room or the green room for them. But we did. We had a pool built in there. It had to be chilled to a certain temperature, not only the water, but the room itself. We had to have special ramps so that their feet could get up. And then even on set, we had very limited work windows that we could work with them, right? And so we basically had to start working our scripts around the penguin and our shoot days, obviously. But we also had to have these little wet mats so that you keep their feet wet while they're on
Were the
set.
penguins, were they temperamental? Were they easy to work with? I mean, I'm getting some good questions, Kevin. How do you get them to social
Yeah.
distance? Which property was this? Um, how do you how do you get
So
a?
yeah, I know
I mean,
so many questions.
what do they like to work with? A penguin. What's it like to work with? As far as are they moody? Are they easy to going? Are they kind of a diva on
No,
set?
they no, they're pretty good. They're pretty good to work with, except that when we were in the research phase, the trainers and the handlers at West Ed were like, "Oh yeah, they could do everything. Whatever trick you want to train them to do, they can do that, and they're super quick learners." You're like, "Oh, okay." So we ran through a few scenarios that we knew we already had in the script, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's easy. It's easy." And of course, when the penguins arrived the first time, they had to have a couple days cooling off period, to decompress from the plane and all that and the transport from Toronto Pearson up to Parry Sound, where we were shooting. And once they got on set, we had like some fairly simple things to happen. But we just started realizing that these penguins, they can't. They just, they kind of do what a penguin wants to do, which is whatever they want to do, which isn't what you've trained them to do.
Right.
I mean, they
Right.
work on food. They're motivated by food, so it's like lots of fish on hand. But they just started. So in the scripts, we actually changed what we would write in there, and we just knew that like, well, if Tux, that was the name of the penguin, was Tux. If they were in that scene, we would actually just write, and Tux does what a penguin wants to do, instead of these elaborate schemes that we used to have, right? And so we actually had this one moment where the one thing that they could do pretty much on command is poop. They love to poop everywhere. And so
Which probably wasn't in the script, right?
no, it never, well, actually it was once. Once it was in there. We had one poop joke, um but yeah, there's this magical moment where it was our last day with the penguin and we had this really touching scene. I want to say it's in episode 9 or 10 where the character of Taylor and her friend Raji are having a discussion, and Tux is in there, and they're sort of talking back and forth, and Tux is in the middle, and he just sort of properly ping pongs back and forth as they have their conversation. And then at the end, Taylor gets up off the bed and walks away, and then Tux sort of looks to her and looks to her, jumps off, and then waddles after her. And
Very
it
cute.
wasn't scripted, but it worked, and it was so beautiful. And he did it 3 times in a row. And every time, like you could drop a pin on set. It was so quiet, everyone was just like, "Oh, will it do it? Will it do it?" And yeah, and every time when we yelled cut, everyone just like jumps up and, "Oh my God, amazing!"
So
You sort of have
basically, you
like your
stole
Rocky
he
Balboa
get,
moment, right, where you parade the penguin around set. Yeah.
he was the best actor on set that day.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely stole
Yeah,
every scene that the Tux was in for sure.
yeah, that's a great story. Excuse me, that's a great story. So what was the
We
production that if we want to look out for Tux?
Oh, that was Northern Rescue. That was Northern Rescue. I'll share another animal
Northern
story.
Rescue.
We worked with the tiger on Between, and this one day, the setup was that there was a petting zoo, and in between, the premise is that the world, again, very, very timely, there's an outbreak and a quarantine exists. The government swoops in, fences up this little town called Pretty Lake, and inside the fence perimeter is a petting zoo, and of course, everyone over the age of 21 dies with this virus. That's just the concept that we had for this show. And so all of the farmers died off basically. And so this petting zoo is left unattended. And so we had a tiger in one of these episodes. And so we're on set in a scene where the tiger goes into this barn. And um, as we were shooting it, you can't tell because we CGI'd out the leash that the tiger was on. Um, but this tiger ended up getting loose from its trainer at one point. And
This is on set, right?
it was on set on a farm where there's cows and chickens and everything. And this tiger just makes a beeline for the opposite barn where all the cows are. And there were actually one of our crew members was in there sitting on a chair in the back, and the tiger runs in, and then like 3 seconds later this guy just starts tearing out of there.
Right.
Fortunately, he's a very old tiger. He's very well fed that day, so he was not going to munch on any humans. No one was injured, fortunately. But it's one of those, funny incidences. Obviously they caught the tiger, within a couple of minutes later.
I,
um,
I got to ask,
no
what was his
chickens were harmed,
motivation?
no cows were harmed.
What was his motivation to run straight to the barn?
Because the cows were in there.
Just to see them, or he was gonna?
I guess so. I mean, the crew member that was in there didn't stick around to find out.
Right, 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 right.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
was that on Northern Rescue as well?
no, that was on Between. That was
Right.
yeah, Between for Netflix and City.
That's a great story. For we've got quite a few people. Liz was just joined. Drew's just joined us. Alex has joined us. Ila is
Hi,
a very
guys.
talented actor. He's from Toronto. He's acted in Australia as well. I know. And Gray's just joined us as well. We're
Oh,
talking
great.
with Emmy-nominated producer David Cormican, and again, he's the president for Don Comedy Television, and also a key part of Mogul as well. So, any questions? Feel free to ask David on the screen now. Talking a little bit on that sort of advice, we'll talk about animals before. I mean, is there any advice you'd give anyone that's in the industry wanting to be in the producing space?
Oh boy. I mean, I would say if this is something you really want to do, you have to have such thick skin. There is so much rejection on a daily basis. We get told no probably more times than actors do.
Right, right.
Uh, but you just sort of have to have super thick skin and an iron stomach because there's times where you're putting your house up against your productions and stuff like that. You have personal guarantees on everything, so it's really like your reputation is key, and you have to follow through on everything you say and do. But if this is something you want to do, be prepared to sort of start at the bottom and work your way to the top. And the reason why that's great in terms of a trajectory is that you'll get to learn every position on a set, or at least from a certain department, depending on what your track is. But the more experience you can get on sets, from low budget to high budgets to every position, the better you're going to be as a producer to be able to call bullshit when someone's trying to pull the wool over your eyes, or just to have, it really all comes down to experience. Again, going back to the beginning of our conversation where I was saying like no one knows what they're doing, but collectively we know everything. And we only know that because of all of our experiences. And so it's great to sort of, work with other people and use them as your ally because you haven't experienced it. They probably have experienced something like that or similar where you can go, okay, well, this is how we dealt with that then. Um, and so, it's all about being creative and bringing solutions as opposed to, problems are going to happen every day, but it's how you resolve them and how you keep your head cool when, the proverbial shit's hitting the fan.
Speaking of that, is there one piece of advice that you've obviously been told that you really stuck with, hey Gerd, that you'd share with people, like just one piece of advice, such as, stick to this or don't let.
I mean, it sounds petty, or not petty, but it sounds just like too polite, I guess, but like hang in there.
Yeah,
It really is. It's a game for those who persevere and those who stick in, and go the long haul. Because you have to keep in mind, like this, there is no such thing as an overnight success. They're all 10 years in the making, right? Even Rocky, even though it was Stallone's first film, technically, but he'd been slogging it out for ages. Um, and it's like trace everyone's big success, and you think it comes out of nowhere, but it comes out of 10 years of building a network, building familiarity with people, building confidence, building your reputation, building that track record of following through with what you say you're going to do on a small scale, on a large scale, and also having mistakes in between and seeing how you've overcome those. And so I think it really is a long game, and it's all about nurturing your relationships, because as you start to rise, so do your friends and colleagues.
yeah,
And I don't want to say it gets easier, but it starts to feel a lot smaller and less foreign.
yeah,
And it just feels like you now have an army of allies that you can call on to say, hey, I need to know this, or I don't know so and so, but you do. Can you intro me? And they're going to introduce you because they've known you for 17 years or 12 years, as opposed to, well, I just met you on Tuesday and it's Thursday, and now you're asking me to introduce you to them. It's like, so it's all about nurturing relationships, really, and being committed to the long haul and knowing that it's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen over 10 years. And then the second part to that advice is, and I'm horrible at this, I'm still trying to get better at it, but it's to stop and celebrate your successes and your wins, because it is such a slog and it's such a grind that you really need to have someone in your life pull you up all the time and be like, hey, you realize you just did that last month? Like, that's great. Holy cow, let's raise a glass, let's high five that. And it could
I
be
think this is excellent
anything big,
advice.
from like landing an order for a series, or locking in a piece of financing, to getting a cast, or actually just finishing your script, or coming up with a great idea. It's like you got to celebrate those, because the rest of it is so hard, that every little win matters, and those little wins turn into massive wins. But it's all that like cumulative snowball effect. And so you sort of have to think that with everything you do, it's all snowball, 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 snowball. And you slowly
Yeah.
pick up more and more snow and more steam, and more people to help push it with you.
And no, and I think that's a really valid point because I think a lot of people look at the idea of outside of being an actor, but like, oh, I'm a director, I'm a writer, I'm a producer, and I want to go straight to working on a $300 million Marvel film. But if exactly like you said, if you trace these people that are getting the director or the producer or even the writer on these Marvel films, they've had so much adversity that they can handle the pressure of when, a $300 million film is technically in their hands to write it or rewrite it or to produce it so it
Of
comes in on
course.
cost. So it's not that thing like you said, I'm going to be a producer and then next year I'm going to be producing, the next Marvel film. It's
Yeah.
this wins and losses that
When
creates.
you kind of touch on it there a little bit, James, with like, we're asking people to give us millions of dollars and to trust us with that. And you don't get trust overnight, right? And so what's going to trust someone to give you $300 million, let alone 30 million, let alone 3 million, let alone 300,000, right? You
Exactly.
can make a film at any level. It's just, how and what along that way, but it's all, doesn't matter how much money is at risk, it's all at risk, and it's still all about trust for your investors and whoever else has put that money up, even if it's your own money. It's all about trusting the people with those dollars to deliver on what you say you're going to deliver.
Very true. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, David, the chat's, I'm getting a lot out of it. I know the feedback's been
Oh, great.
fantastic. So if anyone's got any questions, we've probably got, just looking at the timer, we've probably got about probably three more questions for David if anyone wants to ask anything. But for any filmmakers out there, this is a question that I think a lot of people want to know is if they're making a film right now, how do you see distribution changing in the future in the next 3 years, 5 years?
So I make a $1 million film, for example. Right now, distribution, do you think it will be different within the next, 3 to 5 years, or will stay the same? How do you look at it?
Yeah, I feel like the world's grown up in the last 3 months at a speed of probably about 10 years, right?
Right.
And that's just from, social distancing, physical distancing measures to contactless, payments to Zoom meetings and Zoom pitches and all of that. Um, so in terms of distribution, it's also going to grow up very quickly. There's a lot of gatekeepers right now, but that's been breaking down with the advent of the streamers, right? Obviously you've got the big ones, and now you can't even say the big five anymore because now there's like 10 of them. So that's sort of growing, and you're seeing that flip from linear to streamer, but you're also seeing the advent of AVOD, which is basically old or present day, network television. AVOD, for those of you that aren't familiar, is advertising video on demand. So that's anything like a Tubi or oh God, there's so many of these sites, but Roku, IMDb Live, and those are basically videos where you get to watch for free, but you have to watch advertising in exchange for that. And a lot of models, which are SVOD, which is subscription video on demand, some of them flirt with a dual model where you can pay to bypass the advertisements, and others where you get to watch it for free with advertisements. But I feel that you're going to see a massive rise on the AVOD side, because consumers are feeling the pressure right now, especially with COVID and shrinking wallets and some people being unemployed. Watching those pennies, you're going to turn to content where you can watch it for free. And I don't mind watching an advertisement because I've been conditioned to do that for the last 38 years, right? There's might be some pushback with certain generations, but I feel like there's going to be a rise of AVOD going forward. And part of that, which is going to be key, is curating a brand for your shows, your movies, your content. So similar to, like, think about like HBO. That's a massive brand. Everyone knows what an HBO show looks like, right? Versus you might not be able to tell me what a Netflix show looks like because they've got so many shows on their service. Um, but at least you know where to find it, and everyone's got their Netflix subscription. But so if you're going to, in the future, continue on to make your own product, I think you're going to want to focus on establishing, not necessarily pigeonholing yourself, but establishing your own unique brand of films or series or content that you make, so that you become known for that, so that every time you're not reinventing the wheel with your audience, by attracting a different segment, because there's going to be a power to being able to bring the same eyeballs who like similar content to your projects. And if you
Yeah.
can do those right now on, especially for film and stuff like that, if you can consistently bring similar styled or similar genre films to an audience, there's a huge opportunity there. So thinking like Lifetime and Hallmark, they know their audience and their market so well, and people are, have voracious appetites for those feel
And if
good
you know
rom-com.
Yeah, and if you know your market, obviously you're not having to then really stretch advertising to reach people, because these people are coming, they know what they want, and they're actually going to be, coming to see. Like, like you said, HBO, people have an idea of what sort of shows HBO has. They know what they expect, so they'll come rather than
Mhm.
trying to catch a net, I suppose is the word.
Yeah, but again, HBO's built that brand up over 30 years, right? So everyone
Yeah,
has, again, been conditioned to know exactly what that HBO show is, so they're willing to try the next one.
yeah.
Netflix is still pretty new, right? They're like 10 years old type of thing, um, in terms of original content. So
Yeah, and I think Kaya's just chipped in with a really good point. Definitely will be a rise in digital marketing efforts for film and TV properties, especially during this time. Guys, for anyone that's just joined as well, David Cormican, last chance to ask him a question before we've got to end the chat. Again, Emmy nominated producer, opportunity to ask anything you like. And also, this is also an opportunity to explore the Mogul community at mogulproductions.com. David, it's been a real pleasure to have a chat with you. I'm going to see if any questions come in right at the end. But
yeah, sure. No, this has been great, James. Really, really enjoyed chatting and shooting the breeze with you.
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic. I will just ask for one piece of advice as we go, though. I mean, for any of the actors that have kind of come in, and you've had actors from Australia, Los Angeles, I've seen someone from Los Angeles here, Canada. From a producer's point of view, is there one thing that you'd recommend they do on set that impresses the producer?
Uh, Showing up and being prepared, right? That, honest to God, is so important when actors show up and they're learning their lines on set. That's tough because it's not just you that you're being paid that day. There's 80 other people that are on payroll right now. And so now 80 other people are sort of, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of other work that can go on, but there are times where you're sitting around waiting for that. Know your lines. And I understand scripts change and that's tough. So I really do feel for performers when they get last minute script changes. Um, that's unfair, and that's unfortunately part of the beast due to network notes and changing minds and production exigencies and stuff like that. But yeah, if you can know your lines, show up, be prepared, be ready. I always think of it wasn't my show, but I'm familiar with a lot of the people that worked on it. It was Cardinal and Billy Campbell and Corinne Vanasse were on that show, and as the stars, and Billy he set the tone every day. He started day one of that shoot, would come to set and doesn't stay in his trailer. He stays on set and he reads a book so that he's ready just in case they need him at any point. And so slowly by surely every day another actor would pull up their chair and be on set instead of hanging out in their trailer. And then this whole line of everyone just reading their own books, but they're ready in case you need them.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so great. And my hat's off to the cast on that production, because I think that's so cool, and what a great atmosphere there. But yeah, I would just say,
yeah, I bet there's
because if you're prepared with your lines, there's so much more the director can do to play with everything as well, versus spending time trying to just get it right and nail a take. So at least it gives you, because you're going to see now, and this is just where my brain's going, is you're going to see fewer and fewer takes that are happening in most productions, especially on the independent side when it's a non-studio based production. So,
Yep.
You're not going to have 18 takes to try and get it right and perfect your performance. You're going to have three. And if you didn't get it in the third one, we're moving on, right? We'll fix it in the editing suite, right?
I think that's
yeah, like
fantastic advice.
be prepared. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say we have 1 minute before Instagram's going to kick us off. Kevin's done a great comment. Know your coffee on set. Great feedback, Bella. Love the live chat. This has been a really good chat. Now, I'll quickly say just before we go, David Cormican, part of Mogul. Have a look at the Mogul community. We've got a really great Mogul Live coming up for the next month. Cindy Cowan just won a Emmy Award. She's coming on in 2 weeks. Josh Glower from Duck Dynasty, and also Selling Sunset will be next week. We have Lyric Bent in the first week of July, and then we have Gabe Napora from Electric Panda Entertainment. So next couple of weeks, guys, really good Mogul Lives coming up.
It's a great
lineup.
Much.
Thanks, Andrew. And again, David, fantastic chat. Looking forward to seeing more of you on Mogul Live.
Oh, thanks so much, James. Really appreciate being involved today. And thanks everyone as well for the questions and all the love. That's great.
Thanks, guys. See you again.
Bye-bye.